You've seen it 1,000 times. On postcards, in movies, framed behind a smiling couple in vacation photos. The Eiffel Tower, Paris's crown jewel. A marvel of wrought iron and industrial genius. We're told it was built for the 1889 World's Fair, a temporary structure meant to celebrate modernity, innovation, and human progress. A symbol of light, civilization. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the Eiffel Tower wasn't just a marvel of engineering, but a tool of influence? What if the towering structure wasn't erected to celebrate freedom, but to quietly monitor and manipulate the very minds that gazed upon it? It sounds ridiculous, until you look closer. Gustave Eiffel, the man behind the tower, wasn't just an engineer. He was obsessed with atmospheric science and wave propagation. In fact, after the tower was completed, he installed meteorological sensors, wind gauges, and, most notably, radio transmission equipment at its peak. By 1903, it became one of the most powerful transmission points in Europe. But here's the thing. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about how the Eiffel Tower became a prototype for long-distance frequency broadcasting. How, during World War I, it intercepted German communications and transmitted counterintelligence. How it became a permanent military asset, not just a tourist attraction. Still, think it's just a romantic landmark? In 1920, it was used to broadcast propaganda during France's colonial campaigns in North Africa. By the 1930s, the tower was upgraded with advanced radio equipment that conveniently aligned with the rise of state-controlled messaging. And in World War II, the Nazis didn't destroy it, they protected it. Goebbels himself allegedly approved continued use of its broadcast capabilities. Ask yourself, why would regimes obsessed with control prioritize preserving a tourist structure during wartime? Because the Eiffel Tower isn't just steel and rivets. It's a transmission hub, and it always has been. Now, here's where it gets darker. Some engineers and electromagnetic researchers began noticing that the tower isn't just a passive structure. The iron lattice amplifies certain waveforms, especially in the low-frequency range. These frequencies, around 7 to 13 Hz, are disturbingly close to the human brain's natural resonant frequency. Known as the alpha state, this range is tied to relaxation, suggestibility, and memory imprinting. Coincidence? Not to those who study the convergence of architecture and mind control. Certain fringe researchers claim the Eiffel Tower's structure acts like a giant tuning fork, subtly harmonizing with the consciousness of those around it, especially during large gatherings or emotionally charged events. And it doesn't end there. Surveillance experts have noted that the tower's height and central location allow it to intercept cellular and wireless signals across a vast portion of Paris. In the early 2000s, new microwave repeaters were quietly installed on the tower. The public was told it was to improve telecom infrastructure, but no blueprints were released. No tenders were made public. One whistleblower in 2013 claimed the tower was being used in urban behavior mapping, where signal data from smartphones and RFID tags were being collected and analyzed to monitor population flows, not just physically, but psychologically. If true, it would mean the Eiffel Tower isn't just watching you, it's profiling you. The theory deepens when you consider the spatial design of Paris itself. Radiating boulevards, geometric symmetry, designed by Baron Haussmann under Napoleon III, but rumored to have been influenced by esoteric Masonic principles. The tower sits not just in the center of a city, but in the nexus of a control grid. And in today's world, it's more relevant than ever. 5G antennas, smart city sensors, artificial intelligence behavioral algorithms. The Eiffel Tower has been retrofitted with all of them. Each upgrade sold as progress. But who controls the tower's infrastructure today? What data does it collect? Who decides what gets transmitted and what doesn't? We celebrate the tower for what it looks like. But we never ask what it's doing, because the most effective tools of control are the ones hiding in plain sight. And the Eiffel Tower might just be the most elegant, the most beautiful, and the most ignored machine of influence ever built. Most people think of war as tanks, bullets, and bombs. But in the 20th century, a more subtle form of warfare emerged: frequency warfare. Control the airwaves, and you control perception. Control perception, and you control reality. And at the center of that battlefield, the Eiffel Tower. We already know the tower was used for military communications during World War I. But what's less known is how it became a testing ground for early psychological operations. In 1915, French engineers began experimenting with long-wave broadcasts that could carry across national borders. These weren't just coded messages for soldiers. They were carefully crafted narratives designed to demoralize enemy troops and embolden domestic populations. Propaganda, yes, but also something else, something deeper. It turns out that the frequencies being used weren't just chosen for range. They were selected based on their cognitive impact. Research from as early as the 1920s indicated that certain frequencies, especially in the 10 to 15 Hz range, could induce mild states of euphoria, confusion, or heightened emotional response in human subjects. Most governments laughed it off. France didn't. Throughout the interwar period, various civil broadcast experiments were conducted from the Eiffel Tower, often late at night, at low amplitude. The official story: signal optimization. But declassified notes from the French military suggest a different aim: behavioral testing. Researchers observed fluctuations in public mood, sleep patterns, and even consumer behavior based on subtle tweaks to these signal pulses. Still think radio waves are harmless. Fast forward to World War II. When Nazi forces occupied Paris, one of their first objectives was the Eiffel Tower's transmission room. Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, reportedly called the tower a jewel of amplification. Some claim it was used not just to broadcast information, but to manipulate resistance morale through finely tuned ambient broadcasts that played in the background of civilian programming. Even after the war, the tower's reputation as a military and surveillance asset didn't fade. It was quietly folded into NATO's signal network. In the Cold War era, it became a node in France's domestic intelligence system, allegedly capable of intercepting and triangulating enemy transmissions across Western Europe. But things took an even stranger turn in the 1980s, when digital tech entered the picture. Enter Project Argonne, a rumored French intelligence initiative aimed at developing frequency-based mood modulation in urban populations. Though officially denied, several tech patents filed in France during that period describe a system using triangulated radio waves to affect biological rhythms in confined zones, like, say, the heavily touristed areas around the Eiffel Tower. Suddenly, the scope shifts. This isn't about military enemies anymore. It's about civilian environments, tourist behavior, crowd control, social influence. By the 2000s, things had gone fully digital. The Eiffel Tower became a key transmitter for GSM, 3G, and eventually 4G signals. But again, details matter. Telecom equipment installed between 2006 and 2012 came from contractors with close ties to French defense firms. These installations weren't just basic relays. Some included advanced signal harmonics processors, capable of transmitting layered frequencies, ones that can ride underneath standard transmissions, invisible to untrained analysis. You know what that sounds like? Subliminal transmission. Let that sink in. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people gather around the Eiffel Tower. They take selfies. They eat crepes. They stare up at the steel lattice in awe. All the while, their phones, their smartwatches, their very brains, bathed in a frequency field curated by systems no one fully understands or questions. Why Paris? Why the Eiffel Tower? Because it's beautiful. Because no one suspects it. Because it's the perfect Trojan horse. Let me give you a hypothetical. Imagine you're a government. You want to test a social influence algorithm that adjusts public sentiment using ambient frequency fields. But you need a consistent, high-traffic location where people voluntarily linger and are emotionally engaged. Isn't that what the Eiffel Tower provides? A static, silent crowd. A perfect laboratory. And here's the real kicker. You wouldn't need everyone to respond, just a small percentage. Enough to sway the mood of a crowd. Enough to nudge behavior slightly. Because once that shift begins, the rest fall in line through social mimicry. In other words, the Eiffel Tower might not be broadcasting commands. It might just be tuning society. Tuning it toward compliance, toward distraction, toward whatever tone is needed at the time. And the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. That structure we all admire, that icon of freedom, might just be a signal tower for something else entirely. Paris has always been the playground of the powerful. Artists, emperors, presidents, tech moguls. But look closely, there's a pattern. The Eiffel Tower isn't just a tourist trap. It's a magnet for global elites. And the question is, why? They don't just visit, they host, they gather. They hold midnight events, private galas, charity dinners with $10,000 plates of foie gras. But beneath the champagne and crystal, something else is happening. Something few people talk about. Let's start with the Rothschilds. This centuries-old banking dynasty has deep roots in France. And while their estates and salons span the country, key members have repeatedly used the area surrounding the Eiffel Tower for high-profile and low-profile events. One leaked email from 2016 even included references to geosynchronous alignment and ceremonial peaks, coinciding with a full moon gathering just beneath the tower. What kind of financial family plans meetings around lunar phases? Unless the meeting isn't just about finance. Then there's the Freemasons. Most people think of Freemasons as an old-fashioned social club. But their influence, particularly in French history, is profound. Many of Paris's architectural landmarks, including the radial layout of its boulevards, contain Masonic geometry. But the Eiffel Tower? It's the epicenter. The height of the tower, 300 meters, is exactly 1/1000th of a kilometer. A number chosen for symbolic symmetry. The four legs of the tower face cardinal directions, and when mapped from satellite view, form a perfect diamond intersected by historic ley lines that esoteric theorists believe carry spiritual or energetic significance. It doesn't stop there. In 2007, Google Earth sleuths discovered that the Eiffel Tower is positioned at the convergence of 5 major radio wave propagation zones used by French intelligence. This convergence gives it an unusually high resonance field, not just technically, but some say psychically. Yes, we're talking about the fringe here. But when the fringes keep intersecting with billionaires and secret societies, it's worth asking why. Because the elites keep coming back. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg met with French regulators within view of the tower. Elon Musk has tweeted about Paris as a node of energy and beauty. Even Jeff Bezos, who rarely travels without purpose, has been photographed multiple times near the tower's base. Once, during a midnight walk in 2021. No public explanation. No event on his calendar. So, what draws them here? One theory. It's not just symbolism. It's access. Access to a central node in a global influence network. If the Eiffel Tower is indeed a massive psychological tuning fork, designed to project influence, dampen unrest, or calibrate emotional resonance, then being physically near it during key moments could amplify decision-making power. Not power over others, power over reality. Think about that. In a world where perception shapes markets, elections, and revolutions, whoever shapes the perception wins. And what better place to influence perception than the architectural eye of Europe? the city of light, the city of illusion. It would explain the inexplicable, why world leaders routinely take photos from the tower during high-stakes summits, why tech CEOs announce initiatives there, why popes and presidents alike choose it as their backdrop. They're not just making history, they're anchoring their narrative in a zone of psychological power. Even fashion weeks, seemingly superficial, become suspect. Brands like Louis Vuitton, Dior, and Chanel have hosted runway shows directly beneath the tower. Not for convenience, for alignment. These shows dictate global aesthetic trends. And what better frequency to ride than one humming with mass suggestion? Some even speculate that the tower is a modern obelisk, not unlike those used in ancient Egypt. Tall, charged, symbolic structures used in religious rites and cosmic rituals. The tower's shape, reaching skyward, could function as a conductive pillar, directing not just information but intention. And if that's true, then the elites gathering there aren't just celebrating, they're participating in an ongoing system that uses architecture, technology, and symbolism to reshape the emotional climate of millions. Not by brute force, not by propaganda, by tuning the world itself. So, the next time you see a smiling leader posing under the Eiffel Tower, don't just ask who they are. Ask, what are they amplifying? What timeline are they anchoring us into? Because where power gathers, so does control. And control, real control, is almost always invisible. So we've followed the iron lattice of the Eiffel Tower from military transmitter, to psychological tuning fork, to a magnet for the elite. But what if it doesn't stop there? What if Paris itself, specifically the area surrounding the Eiffel Tower, is just one node in a much larger global system? A control grid. Not the kind made of wires and satellites, but of frequency, geometry, and symbolic placement. A network designed not to move data, but to influence mood, perception, behavior. And the Eiffel Tower? It's the European anchor point. Let's look at the map. Draw a line from the Eiffel Tower to the Shard in London. Then extend that to the Fernsehturm Tower in Berlin. Now connect it to the Mole Antonelliana in Turin, home to the Museum of Cinema, yes, but also surrounded by occult, Masonic architecture. The pattern that emerges? A geometric alignment that conspiracy theorists have long dubbed the signal triangle, a region believed to be calibrated for coordinated energy flow. And Paris sits at the apex. But this isn't just about Europe. Let's zoom out. In the United States, you've got the One World Trade Center in New York, built with symbolic measurements, echoing the original Twin Towers, filled with telecommunications equipment, crowned by a spire that transmits frequency across the Northeast Corridor. In Japan, the Tokyo Skytree stands as the second tallest structure in the world, marketed as a broadcast tower, but shaped in a way some believe mimics torus energy fields. These towers, scattered across continents, all share a few key characteristics. 1. Height and symmetry. 2. Metallic resonant construction. 3. Strategic placement in population-dense zones. But more importantly, they are admired, beloved, unquestioned, just like the Eiffel Tower. Structures we photograph, climb, and celebrate, never suspecting what they might be doing in the background. Still think this is just architectural poetry? Let's talk about Project Palm, a leaked proposal from the early 2000s detailing a network of passive ambient light modulators that would use tall buildings as mounts for signal repeaters invisible to the human eye, but detectable by neural pathways. The idea? To create mood corridors in urban areas, streets where emotions could be dampened or enhanced, using finely tuned light frequencies and background audio. The Eiffel Tower was listed as a test site, and though no one ever confirmed the project's execution, several urban designers began noticing changes around the tower in the years following. New LED installations, color shifts aligned with political events, even a sudden spike in ambient electromagnetic readings during protests. Which begs the question, is the Eiffel Tower transmitting moods? Because if it is, what else is? Imagine a world where cities aren't just places. They're circuits. Cities like Paris, New York, Dubai, Shanghai, all with towering nodes, all transmitting in harmony, adjusting emotional baselines like a global orchestra of engineered thought. Now consider this. When global protests erupt, they often avoid one place, Paris's core. Riots burn on the outskirts, but the center, around the Eiffel Tower, remains eerily calm. Police presence, sure, but also something else. A tension you can feel but can't name, as if the city center rejects chaos. That's not coincidence. That's calibration. And maybe, just maybe, the people who built this grid knew exactly what they were doing. Not for surveillance, not for data, but for synchronization, a way to keep humanity from ever truly breaking free. Not through violence, but through resonance, through engineered emotion. And here's the final twist. If these towers do form a control grid, then taking selfies beneath them, posting them, celebrating them, that's part of the ritual. You're not just visiting a landmark. You're reaffirming its power. You're participating in the system. The Eiffel Tower was never just a monument. It was a signal, a pulse. And maybe that's why it still stands tall, while revolutions crumble and empires fall. Because it doesn't need to fight. It just needs to hum.